So in this video we're going to be looking at these injectors for a 300 TDI. The 200 TDI is exactly the same principle, except it's got a wider body, alright, but the nozzles fit the same. Now a lot of people have been asking me about 2.8 nozzles, will they fit in the 200 TDI? They are the same pattern, the same physical dimensions. Are they going to be right? I don't know. Do I offer tuning advice for injectors and things like that? No, sorry. You know, it's too easy to break an engine. But this video was very difficult to put together. I think I had about 5 or 6 tries and I still couldn't quite get it right. So what I'm doing, I'm starting off by looking at my computer screen with a cross-sectional drawing of one of these and try and explain how they work before we have a look at one on the bench, because it's really complicated. Well, it's simple when you know how. When the penny drops, it's really simple. Anyway, less of this, let's go and have a look at the video. So this is a cross section through our injector. I hope this is clear, because when we actually look at one of the injectors, you will see what's going on. This is off my computer monitor, but I thought it would be easy to do it like this. The yellow path is the diesel. Right, now diesel comes along here through this little bushing here at an angle into this cavity inside the nozzle itself. Diesel can't return because there's a check valve in the injector pump, so it can't go backwards, it can only go forwards. Diesel then is exerted a pressure onto this needle which pushes this pin. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing. This pin is not part of this pin here. There should be a little break here, and this diagram's somewhat confusing because it's not quite the same as we have a look at when we open an injector. So we've got 2 springs, we've got a primary and we've got a secondary. What's happening at rest is all that pressure is pushing down, and there should be just keeping that nozzle closed, if you see what I mean. That's kind of easy. But pay particular attention to this little, like a top hat bush, and the spaces here and here, because these are really will explain quite clearly what's going on. So let's have a look at the next one. This is a bit of a zoom in, and you can see there's a cavity here and there's a cavity here. There's your needle inside your injector nozzle, but there's the pin. Like I said, this should be there should be a mark here to distinguish between the two. But let's have a look now what happens in primary injection. So we can see quite clearly here, we can see that diesel has come down here, it's got into this chamber and it's squirting out, and that's the reason, because the needle has gone back and filled this little cavity here. Alright, but you can see at the same time when it's filled that cavity, it's pushing this spring against the seat of the primary spring. Notice there is no compression on the secondary spring at all. It's a little bit confusing. I would have done that pin in a different colour so you could actually see it, but there you go, it's better than nothing, isn't it? So now let's have a look at the secondary injection. In the secondary injection we can see that this bushing now has moved against the shoulder of this bush here. See, there's your pin in your nozzle, and you can see the fan's wider because the nozzle's opened. But notice too that this top hat bushing is pushing against the spring, compressing that spring and compressing this spring as well, because this has got nowhere else for it to go. So basically that is how it works. So, but let's have a look at some other little diagrams, and I might be able to show you something interesting. This diagram here is off the Bosch manual for the VE pump. It's actually hidden away inside the VE section. But you can see again, it's kind of clear what happens. There's your primary spring, there's your secondary. And you can see this little bushing here, which is called a stop sleeve. I don't know why, but anyway. But it's not very clear when it's not in colour, but you can see that's where the nozzle ends, and this is the pin. The pin hits the bush, pin hits the plate here, which compresses the spring. Any excess diesel getting through between the body of the nozzle and the pin goes through the system, through the springs and out through the spill return. This is a particularly interesting diagram, again from the Bosch VE pump manual, well not a manual but a description of how it works. On the top graph here we see a single spring in an injector, rather like the CAV one. So there we go, we've got a lift, it's open, snaps down shut. But with the two spring system, we've got a primary jump here and then into the secondary and back down again. Notice the time frame, 1-2 milliseconds. That's all it is to open, and this is the height of the injector opening. So there, that's 0.2 of a millimetre. So it's opening about 0.3 of a millimetre with a tiny little bit here opening for the primary. Not much at all. Once you get that, you'll understand it. After seeing the first part with the diagram of these pencil type injectors, these Bosch injectors, when I've got one stripped down on the bench, you will notice something considerably different. In the drawing, the spring here is considerably bigger than the spring here. However, after measuring the coil diameter and the length, they seem to be exactly the same. So therefore, in this instance, the pressure is controlled by the spring, the shims here and here. Alright, now this is something that's really sort of strange. Well, not so much strange, but unusual. This is a Chinese injector that wasn't working properly. But normally, when you strip down an injector, you will not see this bit. You will not see this bit because this collar, this little bushing, cap, the spring and the shims are usually hidden inside here. They are a bugger to get out. JP came up with an idea that we should put a grease nipple on here and hydraulic that out, because the little end cap here will make a seal against this bushing here, thus being able to push out the unit. It's going to be awful messy, and you don't want to lose those little shims. Now, so we can sort of forget assembling that bit, but that's basically what's inside here. So when you usually strip down an injector, should I say, all you're going to see is that, right? So we've got a spring, a pin, shims, this cap, this little bushing, and this really important little cap. Now on the drawing it was showing that this spring went inside this cap, but this is how every one of them I've taken apart. It's like that bushing sits into there. So I really can't understand it. I've got a set of injectors, I'll show you a video later, that I've put together like this, and they work fine. I swapped them over, put them into my Defender, and they work fine. So again, we've got the needle. Goes into the nozzle. We've got the cap. We've got this bushing and this, and it's really straightforward and simple. Now if I put this together, I'm going to have a hell of a job trying to get this out again. So what I can describe, because I really don't want to put it together without cleaning it all up properly. There is a ground face on here and here and here. Do not be tempted to hit these pins or bend them or buckle them in any way. They are location pins, and the pins sit in those two nozzles, two holes here. These are offset, so you can't get the hole for the injector the wrong way around. However, you can put this little item upside down. So just be wary when you're taking it apart. Take a photo of everything that you see. Right, so I'm going to put that back together later. But one thing I want to show you is, as you can probably see, I've got a reamer here, and I'm going to show you something really interesting about these injectors, because it's something that people don't actually cover. So let me put these things out the way, we'll come back. So a little note. I've just tested that injector, it works fine. Funny, isn't it? When you have the primary spring at the top and the shims, is it necessary to strip it down? Not really, not unless the spring's broken. Now it's very difficult to actually find out the spring's broken without putting a pin in and compressing it and see if it compresses. You have to be kind of strong because it is £3,000. But usually I don't touch the primary. I never touch it. I just took it apart for you to see. The other bits that we're concerned with is this end here. And just out of interest, I arranged a few shims down here out of old injectors, ones that's completely buggered. And we'll just have a measure up very quickly of the different sort of thicknesses. So we've got there, we've got 1mm, we've got 0.2mm, 0.9mm, and another 0.9mm. Now, can you buy these shims? Best of luck with that. This is why sometimes I used to send injectors down to a shop because I couldn't find the injectors. Anyway, I'll have a word with Diesel Injection UK. They said they could perhaps find me a few for reference because I am running out. But we only need to change the shims in the secondary because this spring does an awful lot of work. So it might get a little bit weak over time. Alright, so I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next section. As you can see here, I have a cross section of a 300 TDI cylinder head, just to show you what it looks like and all the tappings and things like this. So there's the thread that holds the clamp plate on, so that your pin goes in here and your clamp plate goes through that bolt. There's a stud here. Now if this ever strips out, just be careful because you can't drill it too deep. You don't want to go through the casting because that's the water jacket. That said, look, I get asked a lot of questions which way this copper washer goes, and please check to make sure these are copper and not steel by using a friendly magnet such as this one here. These are copper. You'll find them in the Britrest gasket sets. They are not steel. They are not copper, should I say. So getting this the right way around, I've left the grease nipple in there so you can see the orientation of the spill return. You'll put your nozzle in like this. Alright, that's how it goes. You can see the protrusion of the nozzle. Now, here comes a very interesting question and a few things that I've been asked before. You can machine these cylinder heads providing you cut the valves to the same depth. But what about the injectors? What about the injectors? Because whatever you take off here, the nozzle is going to stick out even further. Now, I've not really done much with it in practical situations. I've never really thought about it all that much. But if the nozzle is sticking out further, is this going to cause heat damage to the tips? I'm not sure. In the HS 2.8 manual, it specifically states that you should not put two copper washers on here. I wonder if that's why. I don't know. Usually, like I said, Land Rover stated that you shouldn't machine the heads. There must be a reason for that. But we've got away with it for years, so it doesn't really matter. Now, other things about these nozzles that you've got to be very, very careful of. This applies to both 200 TDI and 300 TDI. Getting the nozzles out. A lot of people, when these stick, and a lot of people are very tempted by putting a spanner across the flats here and twisting and turning this until it comes out. Now, as you saw, I don't know if this one's loose, is it? Oh yeah, this one's loose. As you saw, because I've been playing around with this. Oop. There are two tiny pins in there. Now, let me put them back in the right way around. Bear with me, because I don't want to bugger that one up. I've got so many injectors in bits, it's unbelievable. Now, If you were to find that the injector's stuck, invariably through carbon build-up round here where the nozzle sits, this always gets carboned up and it sticks. Well, invariably, if this is stuck, you'll find that this piece is stuck as well, the cap. The temptation is to turn it. By turning it, if this is stuck, you'll shear the pins. So this is why you'll see me when I take old nozzles out, I'll pull them out with a slide hammer. I've got so used to it now, I just don't bother. I just pull them straight out because I don't want to break them, because we're in the back of Beyond. We can't just go down to a local scrapyard or something like that, or your mate, and say, oh, have you got a spare injector? Because nobody's got any. So that's that. But there's more. A lot of people find out that this copper washer, or if they've put the steel ones in, isn't really sufficient for sealing. And what you'll get combustion pressure come up through the side of the injector and start blowing all sorts of rubbish out of here. You'll have seen it before. And even I've come across that a few times. Principally, if somebody's fitted a steel washer and it doesn't compress, it eats into the seat. And this is where this tool comes in. JP knocked me this up. Well, I bought this mill here. This is a 4-flute mill, and we made a little handle to go on the end. And what it does is it sits down. It's 17mm, the same diameter, and it allows me to just turn the handle here and recut those seats ever so slightly. Make sure it's lubed up. Now this won't do it because it's a cutaway and it's tending to jump out, but it's an ideal way to see how you can reseat those really, really easy without going to a machine shop. You don't need to do that. You just need to clean them out a bit. It might be carbon, it could be a bit of raised aluminium, but boy, does it make a difference. So, I've been doing this video for about 3 or 4 days, and I don't know really what I've got on my computer anymore, but I'm going to put a set of injectors that I've tested on the prop tester, and I put them into my 300 TDI Spanish 110 just to see how they go. They were good.